Hey everybody, this is a video response to a request that I had from Mr. Creepshow09 here on YouTube, who asked me to just kind of give share some experiences with seeing a lot of these early slasher classics in the theater as they were originally released. Um, One thing I need to clarify is that back then I was far too young to go and see these movies on my own unless I snuck in, which I successfully did on several, and very unsuccessfully did on many more. Uh, but I was fortunate that I had a friend whose father had no problem with taking us to go see these movies. He was actually friends with the owner of the local drive-in, the Starlight Theater in Watsonville, California, and would routinely take us to go see movies like Zombie, Don't Go in the House, The Boogans. Um, God, what else did we see there? I think we saw Silent Scream there. The Grim Reaper, also known as Anthropophagus, we saw there. Of course, it was heavily edited back then. But the one thing that I really remember about these nights going to the drive-in is he had this old 1970s kind of Brady Bunch style station wagon, and he would pull into the space backwards so that we could roll down the wide back window, and he would go in and get us a big pizza from the concession stand, which always tasted like cardboard. It's like the worst pizza ever, but it just tasted really good while watching these great films. And we would sit back there while he sat in the front seat drinking straight from a bottle of Jack Daniels. I remember this clear as day. And never really thinking of it at the time, but in retrospect, I just wondered how hammered he was as he was driving us home from these movies, while we rolled around unseatbelted in the back of this, the 80s. Throw caution to the wind. They probably would have, if they got pulled over back then, he probably would have just said, "Oh, you just drive straight home. Get those kids to bed." Things are so different now. But I remember there used to be a lot of promotional stuff for a lot of these movies. I know the Del Mar Theater downtown Santa Cruz, when Happy Birthday to Me came out, we went to go see that, and they actually had a table set up in the lobby that had this birthday cake that was kind of smashed on one side and had blood splattered all over the table, and there were 6 seats around it. And as you bought your ticket, they would give you these invitations to her birthday party, and you open it up, and if there was a red stamp or some kind of a stamp or a mark or something on the inside, there were 6 of them that were marked. And you could take your place at this table, and after the showing of this movie, the lucky winners, of which I wasn't one, unfortunately, but they got to sit around the table and pretend like they were dead and have commemorative photos taken. So, there was a lot of fun built around these movies, and going to see these movies sometimes was quite an event in itself, and a lot of times the activities surrounding the movies were more fun than the movies themselves. I remember being fairly disappointed in Happy Birthday to Me. The ad campaign just promised a lot more than it actually delivered in its mutilated form, thanks to the MPAA. But it was fun nonetheless. I think another really fun movie that I saw in the theater was The Funhouse. The theater was packed, and that was one that I got to sneak into. I had to sneak in to go see The Funhouse. And but it was easy, and I could actually relax during the movie because all I did was I found a space next to some grown-ups and sat down in the seat right next to them. And I remember them looking over at me curiously a few times throughout the movie, and I think it finally dawned on them that here's this 12-year-old kid sitting in here without parents. But, fortunately, they were decent enough to not rat me out to the ticket checkers. They came through with their flashlights. And I remember really loving The Funhouse, and I love it to this day. I mean, it has its faults. If you ever have a chance to read the book, the movie wasn't based on the book, was the other way around, and Dean Koontz used a pseudonym to write a novelized version of the film. And the book is really, really exceptional. It's a great, entertaining read. It goes into a lot of backstory that the movie just completely, he built a lot of backstory on the characters, and if they could have included a lot of the elements that he included in the book, the movie would have been 100 times better. Of course, knowing that it was a Tobe Hooper film, and I hadn't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre yet at that point, because I don't think that my parents had started going to the video stores and renting the machines and renting the videos yet at that point. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre just had this legend around it even back then, and so I thought it was just going to be a lot scarier than it was, but it was still a good time. But by far, the drive-in movies were always the best. Seeing these really just god-awful, a lot of Italian slasher movies. And I remember one time we went to go see, it was either House by the Cemetery or something, but I think it was a second run. I think it was like a re-release at that point. But it was a double bill with Russ Meyer's Vixens, I think. It was some Russ Meyer movie. And so after the horror movie was over, we were all ready to go home, but my friend's dad wanted to stay and catch a quick glimpse of this Russ Meyer film. Or maybe it was something about cherries. I don't remember. But, being that young, we didn't really have any interest in seeing this soft-core kind of porn movie. We kind of giggled and laughed at some of the stuff. And he didn't stay for all of it. But another very vivid memory that I have is I had another friend who actually lived in these apartments. Where the drive-in theater was kind of at the base of a hill. And of course it had the giant screen, and then kind of behind it, facing the screen where the hill went up, they had built this long apartment complex. And they lived, one of my friends, his parents, and he lived in these apartments, and we would sit in his room at night and watch a lot of these movies that, I remember watching Thank God It's Friday, which I know isn't a slasher movie or anything, but this was in 1978, I think. Some disco movie. Disco was really big back then, and we thought it was stupid, but we would sit there and kind of act out the scenes with our voices. Like, we would make up dialogue and lines through these movies, and kind of make our own movies, because we obviously didn't have the sound to go along with the film, but we did that with several horror movies as well. I just can't remember what they were, because that was a lot. I mean, I think one of them might have been, one of them might have been a later release or re-release of like Tombs of the Blind Dead or something, because I remember there being these kind of rotting corpses in monk robes, like walking, and we did our little dialogue thing with that one. That was really funny. We'd be like, "Oh, I want to have sex with you," and all kind of stupid stuff, and kiss my face, and I don't know, it's just dumb, and it's like what little kids do. But those memories are great, and I remember his mom would make us these really bad frozen French fries that she baked in the ovens. They didn't have the right texture or anything, and she'd make these like Totino's party rolls or something that tasted awful too, but we dipped them in lots of ketchup. And so we'd sit in there, and they let us look through the window, and they knew what we were doing, watching these forbidden films. So just a lot of fun. And I think a lot of the fun with those movies back then is that they were forbidden. If you were too young to see them, I think it actually made it a lot more fun than if you could legitimately get into these films. The exception to that, though, was the double bill of Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2 that came out at the Del Mar Theater in 1981. I think it was 1981, it had to have been. I think that's when Part 2 was released. But I had kind of an acquaintance, like a friend of a friend that was just 17, and I begged her to take me. I said, I'll even pay for your ticket. And I think tickets back then for movies were $4 for a regular nighttime feature and $2.50 for a matinee. So, that was a lot of money for me back then. But I plunked down the $5 to get us both, and she got me in. She said that she was my sister, and they accepted that as a guardian kind of thing. And we saw Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2. I'm glad that I saw those movies back to back because. And legitimately getting in to see those because those movies actually really did scare me. So there was the build-up matched what I experienced on the screen. And seeing those on the big screen now, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything because it's just, you really felt like you were in the forest or you were in the cabin, and just a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm so fortunate that I grew up back then, and these memories of seeing these films are very, very, very dear to me. One thing you can do, if I know here in Portland, right around the corner from where I live, is one of the grand old theaters. I think it was built back way in the early 1900s. It's called the Hollywood Theater. I should know when it was built. I'm actually a member of the theater group, but it's the Hollywood Theater. And it's a great independently run theater that's operated by a nonprofit group. And every year they host the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival there. They show a lot of foreign and art type films, a lot of documentary films. And about once a month, they will show a movie, like a midnight movie. They'll show Zombie, or they recently just showed the original Jaws from the original print, which was actually quite cool. They show just a lot of old retro horror films there. And, if you have an independent theater, a theater that's not associated with UA or Regal or any of these other giant conglomerate, theaters, talk to the management about possibly hosting kind of a horror night and do some research and see if you can get your hands on some films that can actually be shown in these theaters and make it an event. I know that this theater over here is available to do things like that. I've never taken the time to look into hosting something like that, but it's something I may do in the future. Because they already have, these showings of these retro films. I hate calling them retro films because they're from my lifetime. It makes me feel really super old. But that's something that you can certainly look into. I know other people have done it and done it with great success or varying degrees of success. But I'll tell you, the horror fans that are out there in your area, if you host something like that and you show some good films, especially if you can get original or uncut prints to show, will be forever grateful to you for letting them also have that experience of seeing these great and sometimes not so great but fun nonetheless films on the big screen. It's kind of like a time capsule going back in time. But anyway, I hope I've shared some fun bits with you, and until later.